On a snowy Christmas Eve, my little brother Ricky and I were leaving our grandmother's house. The winter storm had intensified on our way home, and the roads were treacherous. Being a new driver and responsible for my brother's safety, I was understandably anxious. My grandparents lived in the countryside, which meant we had to cover miles before reaching the city's downtown area where they lived. Since I had visited them after almost 7 or 8 years, I relied on my phone's GPS to navigate through the unfamiliar route. Unfortunately, my phone died after barely 10 minutes of driving, leaving us stranded without a way to call for help. Compounding our situation, my brother didn't have a phone either. We briefly considered turning back to our grandparents' house, but it didn't seem like a viable option. We weren't that close to that side of the family, and I thought it would be awkward to go back. As a result, we continued driving blindly, with no idea of the way forward. In hindsight, turning back might have been the better choice. Fortunately, I managed to find my way back to the town where my family lived. Hoping to find a phone charger or someone to lend me a phone, we stopped at a few gas stations, but they were all closed. Our luck seemed to have run out until we stumbled upon an open hotel. I was relieved and thought to myself, "Thank God, they'll definitely have a phone." To my surprise, the hotel was empty, except for one worker at the front desk. I explained our situation, and he graciously allowed us to borrow a phone. However, his warning that we might have trouble getting service was unsettling. Despite his ominous tone, I dialed my mom's number, but the phone just beeped continuously, indicating no service. I tried repeatedly, but my efforts were in vain. Hours had passed, and we were exhausted from trying to come up with a solution. I reluctantly decided that we would have to spend the night at the hotel and leave first thing in the morning. I felt terrible because I knew my parents must be worried sick about us. Plus, I hadn't mentioned that the place we were staying in was pretty sketchy. The building looked rundown even before we stepped inside, so I wasn't expecting anything fancy. But the room we got was downright disgusting. The sheets smelled terrible, and I didn't even feel comfortable sleeping on the bed. However, I was so exhausted that I eventually dozed off. I woke up in the middle of the night, as I often do, but this time I was grateful for it. Who knows what could have happened to my little brother if I had slept for even a few moments longer. When I realized he was gone, my heart was pounding with fear. I frantically searched the room but couldn't find him. I dashed outside and ran down the hallway and stairs to the front desk. "Have you seen my brother? He's missing," I asked the bewildered clerk. "No, I haven't," he replied in shock. "How is that possible?" I wondered to myself. I raced out of the building in just my shorts, t-shirt, and slippers, and then I saw someone in black holding my brother's hand, trying to lead him into a car. "Let him go, you piece of shit," I yelled as I ran towards them. The stranger took off running with my brother, but I caught up to them and hit him in the back of the head with all my might. I had never run so fast in my life. As I knocked down the guy and he fell to the ground, I slipped on ice and he ran away. I grabbed my brother and took him inside. After calming him down, I explained everything and reassured him that everything would be okay. It turned out that Ricky couldn't sleep and had taken my wallet to buy snacks from the vending machine. He was lured out by some strangers. I don't know what their intentions were or how they planned to get away with it. I'm just relieved that my brother is safe. We managed to get service a few hours later and called the authorities. With my mom's help, we returned home. The police didn't have much information on the strangers, but they suspect that the car they were driving was stolen. The only details I could provide were that the man was tall, about 6'2", and fairly skinny, with a shaved head, and was in his mid-50s. This experience traumatized both my brother and me. It's heartbreaking to think that he might still be out there, harming other children. I was on a road trip to visit my cousin who resides in El Paso, Texas. Given that I am located in the northern part of Michigan, this journey involves an exceptionally long drive, which can be somewhat overwhelming. Nevertheless, I have been making this journey annually during the summer for the past 4 years, and I have become somewhat accustomed to it, though it remains a challenge to drive such a long distance in one go. Although I take periodic breaks, the extended periods of sitting in the same position can make me irritable and sore. However, I adore visiting my cousin, so the effort is entirely worth it. During the first night of driving, I had been on the road for approximately 9 hours, with only a brief stop at a gas station for snacks and a bathroom break. As it was getting late, I realized that it was time to find a place to rest before I became too fatigued to drive safely. Although the nearest motel was about 30 minutes away, I decided that it would be best to stay there. When I arrived, I sensed a slight uneasiness, perhaps due to the unfamiliar surroundings or the fact that the motel appeared somewhat shabby. Nevertheless, I opted against sleeping in my car at a rest stop and chose the motel instead. Although there was a town nearby, the area had a rustic, out-of-the-way vibe. I don't mean to imply that my experience was negative. On the contrary, it was quite peaceful. Despite the rundown appearance, the luxury of sleeping in a bed was a relief after a long day. After some stretching and snacking, I turned on the TV and dozed off. I'm not certain how long I had been asleep when I was jolted awake by loud banging on my window. "Help me, man. Let me in. It's an emergency." The urgency in his voice was alarming, and I considered opening the door to help him. However, something in my gut told me not to trust him, so I advised him to seek assistance at the front office or elsewhere, since I was sound asleep, and his sudden appearance scared me. He responded with hostility, saying, "Whatever, man. Screw you," and walked away. I was left reeling from the experience for about half an hour, trembling with anxiety and unable to sleep in case he returned. Perhaps it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, but he returned, this time with even greater anger. He attempted to open the door using the handle, eventually breaking through the lock. "What do you want from me?" I shouted in terror. "Just give me your wallet, and everything will be fine," he replied. The moment he walked in, he brandished a gun, pointing it at me while demanding, "I won't ask you again." In response, I swiftly surrendered my wallet, phone, and keys, and he fled with my car, along with who knows what else. As he sped away, the sound of burning rubber filled the air. I quickly made my way to the front desk, narrating everything that had just occurred. The authorities were summoned, but there wasn't much they could do, arriving 30 minutes later. It wasn't until roughly 2 days later that my car was discovered, entirely destroyed, approximately an hour and a half away. Fortunately, I had only $150 in my wallet, and I canceled my cards before he could drain my credit limit. This was, without a doubt, the most insane event I have ever experienced, leaving me shaken to the core. I opted to skip visiting my cousin that year, with my fiancé taking a day off work to pick me up. I haven't heard any further developments in the case since then. It may sound a bit strange, but on my 19th birthday, my friends threw a small party for me at a rundown motel located in a rough part of town. We chose this particular motel because it was cheaper and we could get away with more than at an average hotel or motel. Since none of my friends had their own place yet, we decided to have the party there, with no parents or rules to follow. We were all smoking weed, getting high, and drinking, and I was having a great time. Initially, there were only 6 of us, but more people started showing up as time went on. By 11:30 p.m., there were about 15 of us crammed into the small room, with some people I didn't even know. I tried to call off the party and stop people from inviting more guests, but more people kept showing up, and we eventually got a noise complaint. The manager told me and 2 of my friends that we had to make everyone leave, or we would all be kicked out. So we did just that, and it ended up being me and 2 friends. To be honest, I preferred it that way, as it was too crowded with all those people. At around 1 o'clock, we were all heavily intoxicated and decided it would be a fun idea to go for a walk outside. Drama seemed hesitant at first, given the dangerous area we were in, but we convinced him to join us, assuring him that everything would be fine. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse. As we strolled along a main road in Detroit, blaring music from our speaker, we accidentally wandered into a sketchy neighborhood and encountered a group of 8 or 9 menacing-looking guys. Their body language and tone of voice were threatening, and I sensed that trouble was brewing. Without warning, they attacked us, brutally assaulting us and stealing our phones, cash, and alcohol. One of them even stole my watch, a gift from my parents on my previous birthday. After the attackers fled, we discovered that our friend Tommy had been knocked unconscious. With no means of contacting the police, we were forced to carry him back home. Looking back, I can't believe how foolish and naive we were to think that nothing could happen to us. This was undoubtedly the stupidest thing I've ever done, and I regret every aspect of that night. As a result of the attack, Tommy and I both suffered severe concussions, and John had a cracked rib. We filed a police report, but there was little they could do to help us. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me. The best is yet to come.